Hey, welcome back to Connections Break Barriers. This is a special conversation series with the MBA programs at Kennesaw State University. Today, I'm talking to an absolute legend in the city, Hala Moddelmog. She has held numerous high-profile positions and done amazing work. When I thought about a conversation series that would be about relationships, she was one of the first people that I thought about. What you will see in this conversation is that outside of being a master networker, she's a master friend. She's a master at bringing people together. And I'm super excited for you to be able to watch this conversation. First and foremost, I appreciate you taking the opportunity. It's so good to speak with you. How are you?
I'm great, and I will tell you this, I'm very flattered to be asked. I love this topic, and, I adore you and what you've done at the Gathering Spot, so I'm flattered to be amongst this group.
So this conversation series is all about relationships, and I appreciate you. When I was thinking about folks in town that I really admire, that have developed deep and meaningful relationships, that know how to bring stakeholders together, you were like at the very top of the list. So I have so many questions for you. Before we get to some of that, though, I want to make sure that we go over your background, right? We all come from somewhere, and I think it informs what we're doing in real time. So where's home?
I grew up in a small town in Georgia. It's called Hartwell, and they have a lake there, so we were very lucky there. But I grew up in a small family, just small community, and from the very beginning, my father was pretty into, get yourself off the couch and be doing something. And even to the effect that one story I remember about growing up is once I was riding in a car with him and I didn't wave to someone else in the other car, and he let me have it because he thought it was rude and who do you think you are and everything like that. So I had some pretty early lessons about treating others with respect and just being engaged and being friendly and being social because the world needs a lot.
No, I didn't realize until I moved to DC years ago that Southern thing of talking to folks is a real thing. I remember getting on an elevator in DC and I was like, "Hi," and folks were looking at me like,
Three heads.
Why are you talking to me?" Going back to home though, so the relationships that were important at that time. I mean, who do you think about when you think about folks that were influential when you were growing up?
Well, that's a great question because I do think about those people. Again, I had a very just strong family. My father was a lineman for the county, blue collar worker. My mother was a secretary for the superintendent of schools. Older brother, younger sister. Really just living a beautiful, wonderful small town life. But I will say this: my father is definitely one of the ones who influenced me the most because even though he was not some executive, even in that small town, we had executives, he did so much in the community. And he just was always engaged and always coming up with creative ways to do things. He was the chair of the board of a group that took care of adults with Down syndrome and that type of thing. One crazy quick story about him, my mother died when I was 17 and she was 42, and my father remarried, and his mother passed away.
Wow.
And he got a small inheritance from her, and without even telling his new wife, he gave all that money to build a place to house these adults with Down syndrome.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so, she was a little flabbergasted. But that's kind of the kind of guy he was. Did a lot with our church, the youth, the Boy Scouts, took all the scouts to Philmont. So just always being engaged. And since he was so engaged, we were all engaged. And again, it's not hard to be to be really active in such a small town because people need help, and you're just kind of there in the process.
What did you want to be at that time of your life?
It's interesting. I had some contrasting things because I love literature and I knew I wanted to major in English. I had a pretty good idea that wasn't going to lead me to the top of the business world, but that's what I really wanted to study. And I remember as a little kid, just kind of being, out in the woods or something and thinking, I just really want to be the president of something someday. Wouldn't that be cool? I didn't have a clue what that meant. I just thought it sounded cool.
Yeah.
And every time an airplane went overhead, I was like, I want to be on that airplane because I just wanted to see more.
It's amazing. So I want to fast forward a little bit. Your first meaningful opportunity. I've been asking everyone this. It's been interesting, right? Some folks talk about their first job kind of in their career. We've had others that have talked about like their very first job, paper route at 11. When did you find the first opportunity in work that you felt like it was significant, that you were excited about it?
I've got a very quick answer on that one, and I'll tell you it was when I became president of Church's Chicken. I was in my late 30s, and since we're talking about relationships, the man who was the CEO of AFC, which was stood for America's Favorite Chicken, because we owned Popeyes and Church's and a few other brands too, but those were the big ones. And I had met Frank Bellatti's his name. I had met Frank because I'd worked at Arby's as my first job out of graduate school.
Wow.
So I had met him there, knew him. He took Popeyes and Church's out of bankruptcy and formed AFC. And he called me up one day out of the blue to say, would you like to come and be the marketing person for Church's Chicken? And I was like, wow, I don't know. I've never led a whole marketing team, and I don't know that much about the brand. But he goes, look, you're going to love this brand. He said, it's got your name all over, whatever. So I went there, and a couple years in, the person who was the president of Church's left, and Frank asked me if I wanted to interview for the job. And so that really opened up so many avenues for me, and it was a relationship that had started long ago, but must have been at least 10 years before, and he just had the faith in me. And I will tell you, one of the main reasons that he had faith that I could do that job is that during those 2 years of being the lead marketing person, I got close to the franchisees. They needed respect. They had felt a little disenfranchised in the regime before. I genuinely liked them as people, and they trusted me. And it was all about those relationships, because he knew, because I was the first woman to be the head of an international fast food chain. I was also, back in the day, the first marketing person, because back then it was always finance or operations. So really that marketing part was a little bit of the bigger surprise than the woman thing, but he knew that they would trust me, and they did, and he knew the guys in the field would trust me, and they were mostly guys in the field. Yeah.
In addition to the skill set, right, and that you had to be doing a great job at your job, but what characteristics, what values do you think Frank saw in you? What were you trying to make sure that folks understood about your leadership style, how you showed up?
You know what? I'm going to be honest. I wasn't thinking about it at all. I was just being who I was and doing what I do. I, always made the numbers. I always worked the hardest because that's what you do. It's kind of the way I was raised. And so, and then also the relationship part came naturally to me as well. I mean, I think work is so social, and I know that's why I'm still working. I know that's why I love it. And it just wasn't hard to get those relationships because I truly cared about the people. So I didn't envision it, but Frank saw things in me that I hadn't even thought about for myself. And one was when I was kind of interviewing with him, because there were some other competitors, all men, all in operations. And I never mentioned strategy. And he goes, well, don't you want to tell me how good you are at strategic planning? And I went, yes, that's a great idea. So then I talked about that. And, again, the other thing is I understood the P&L, and way back in the day with fast food, sometimes you would have these silly marketing people who didn't understand how the money flowed to the bottom. And if you want to get on the wrong side of a franchisee or a guy out in the field trying to make his numbers, you put out something silly in marketing that doesn't flow. And I didn't do it, so it was really, it was pretty straightforward, just pretty easy, the whole thing. Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, your involvement outside of work was also really important to you at this time. what were you doing outside of work, and like why was it
Well-
why were you doing so much of it?
Well, here was the thing. Okay, so when I became the president of churches, I had two kids, fourth grader and second grader, fabulous husband. Let's just start right there, and incredible in-laws who we lived in Buckhead and they lived in Dunwoody. So they took care of the kids. So that set me up to really be able to do the work. The other thing that I've mentioned quite a few times, but is just such a great story, is I'm telling you, the nanosecond I got the title of president of churches, and this was back in '97, and you may not remember, and some of your listeners probably won't remember, but back then there just weren't that many women in Atlanta with a title, or that title, that kind of title. And so when that happened, Ann Kramer and Jane Smith called me. You've heard this story before because I tell it every time. They called me. They said, we must have lunch. You must get engaged in the community. This is what you must do. You must start with Leadership Atlanta, and whatever you have a passion for, we need to see you on those boards and everything. So I was like, okay, sign me up. I'd grown up that way, and I knew I had a great support system. And I'll tell you, the good thing about working at Church's Chicken with small kids is I did, of course I was away from them more than I wanted to be. But when you're running either a chicken chain or a roast beef chain, and you got little kids, and let's say I can't show up at a mommy party or whatever, I just send a tray of chicken tenders, and then it's done. And so then I'm the hero, they're the hero, and everybody is happy.
Yep. No, I remember those Church's Chicken days. Churches after church was was a real thing. Fast forward a little bit, you had a number of really high-profile roles. Where I had an opportunity to meet you for the first time was leading the Metro Atlanta Chamber.
Right.
Relationships are at the core of that organization. So take us behind the scenes of that process. Why was that opportunity the right one at that time?
Well, it's interesting, and I think in this case, relationships had everything to do with it, because I was not, in my mind, a usual suspect for that job. I mean, you've heard me probably say this before too. I didn't play golf, I didn't shoot birds. There were just so many things I didn't do. But I had met people in town through my community activities that I'd gotten to be personal friends with, and again, especially the women, I'd say. And people like Carol Tomei, Donna Highland, Larry Gellerstadt, I think Doug Hertz, the people on the interview panel. I think there were about 8 or 12. Paul Bowers, who was at Georgia Power at the time, were on the interview panel for that job. And if I had not had those relationships, I wouldn't even have been thought of. And then the other thing about it is there had been some relationships that needed to be repaired, especially across all 29 metro counties, because of course Metro Atlanta Chamber is the big kahuna, and they do a great job. But if you're really going to do your job, you've got to be connected with those 29 counties and the state of Georgia. So there were some relationships that needed to be repaired, and I said to them during the interview, after they kind of explained what needed to happen, I said, well, if you guys are serious that you don't care who gets the credit, that Metro Atlanta Chamber doesn't get the credit, then I can get this done behind the scenes. And that's just what we did. We changed a lot of things. We got a lot of relationships going, and it was just a blast. I mean, it was so much fun.
Take us from a process standpoint, though. That job, and really all of the ones we've talking about, requires so much. There's so many stakeholders. You're at events all the time. You're meeting people all the time, trying to keep up with little bits of information about this person just moved from this opportunity to another one. This company's coming into town. You've got to relearn. So, from a process standpoint, how have you kept all of that information organized in a way where it's useful to you?
Well, I will tell you, the first thing you do is start with a great team. And the team that I inherited at the Metro Atlanta Chamber was really good at this. They had people there very focused on it. And I was quite a few years younger when I was at the Chamber. And the younger you are, the more you can remember, and I would remember what the women wore. I remember a lot of stuff about people's kids. And to your point, you really must keep up from a business standpoint. And we also, and the Chamber I take no credit for this, but they were masters and still are at when somebody's coming to town, a new company's coming to town, taking a look at us. You know, we know when they like to have breakfast. We know what exercise they like to do. I mean, we really got to try to understand who these people were to make those connections. And so it really, it just, yeah, but it does take time. And you really, it's almost embarrassing if you have an encounter with someone that in theory you really probably should have known better, if known more about them. So you don't ever want that to happen if you can avoid it. It happens sometimes because we can't know everybody, but you know.
I don't know. In the years that I've admired watching you be in these roles, it has always felt like you know everyone. Like you're able to walk even events and figure out how to like make folks really know that you know the history that you have with them. And the last thing, and this is I think a thing that's another lost art, you're super responsive. Like you can like faster than anyone I feel like I've met in this city. Like you get back incredibly quickly. So I've observed that, but true or false, that sounds like it's something that's important to you.
It's very important to me, and I appreciate the compliment, and I take it as a compliment, and I've gotten it before. Yeah, I'm just, look, if somebody, you know, wants me or needs me, I mean, again, that's the way I was raised, and that's the way you get ahead in business, and it's just a sign of respect for other people. And, you know, again, it takes a great team, and the Woodruff is just as great as the Metro Chamber was. It's surrounding me with the data and with the help that I need, but it's really important. And I will tell you, I hate this, but as I get a little bit older, this is a Friday afternoon, I won't run home and do quite as many emails to get it done as I might have in the past. You know what I mean? I might wait till Saturday or Sunday, or maybe even Monday morning. And it's a little unusual for me, but I do have some grandchildren now, and I'm not missing out on them. But I mean, what does it take? And even if I can't have an answer, what does it take for me to say, gosh, I'm sorry, I'll have to get back to you later on that or something? It's just a sign of respect.
So you mentioned the Woodruff Arts Center. We have to spend some time there. Yep. Another massive organization that you're leading currently. Why that opportunity? Why was it the right time? And similar question: How did you get there?
Yeah, well, this one again is super easy to answer. I mean, having been at the Metro Atlanta Chamber and just loved that job, loved the people, and I just got to meet all the CEOs in town. And so you do need, as you well know, Georgia's 50 out of 50 states in arts funding. So the big corporates and the foundations in town really make this place work with the arts and, you know, a handful of other things as well. So I knew all the CEOs from my time at the Chamber, and what happened is I ended up taking the job during COVID, the early days of COVID, with no vaccines. We were having no earned income at the Woodruff. So being able to know those CEOs and literally, with the help of Doug Hertz, he was the chair at the time, he and I basically just spent a lot of time on the phone, just literally calling these CEOs and saying, look, I know, you know, you're exhausted, you're trying to make your own way through. I know the humanitarian nonprofits are in desperate need and you're helping them, but if we want to see the Woodruff Arts Center be able to keep its people, keep paying the orchestra, and make sure that we're ready to go when the things comes back, you know, we need your money. And they stepped up. And so having those relationships that I made at the Metro Chamber made it so easy for me to step into that part of the role. And I will tell you, though, it is interesting, you know, because both of these last jobs have a certain amount of diplomacy that's needed. And, you know, again, I learned a little bit of that from the franchisee market. And again, from living in a small town, because everybody knows your business. So if you're not diplomatic and a little bit careful.
We'll find out.
But the thing is, somebody said to me the other day when I was talking about, you know, we have these three wonderful art partners, the Symphony, the Alliance Theater, and the High Museum of Art. but we're one 501c3, and I was explaining, the complexity. They go, so you're just kind of like the Roger Goodell of arts, right? I'm like, I don't think so, but I see your point.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those organizations that I wish more folks. It's massive, right? In the work that's happening, and I think a lot of folks think of it in an evening context because that's when maybe they're the most. But my kids are there mostly during the day,
absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
they're regular. It's amazing what's happening.
And
there.
I'm so glad you understand that and know that, because I think not a lot of people in Atlanta do. And a lot of people, I mean, I was at the Venture Atlanta conference that we hosted at our place the last couple of days and reconnected with those people that I'd met, kind of like the way I met you through this. And, I started talking to Bill Nussey as an example about neuro arts. And there's a whole thing, practice growing up around neuro arts, because art helps with brain development. And if you miss it, you miss it. And it helps with mental health, et cetera. And, Bill's like, I don't even care for art, but that's so exciting. Neuros, yeah. And so we really need to do a better job. And again, there are still people that think that the Woodruff is for old white people. And, we're working hard on making sure people get the broader view. And what we do for children, I couldn't be more proud.
No, the effort, and I can speak personally, it's incredible. There's so many opportunities. My kids are there before my daughter started school very regularly.
Yeah, right.
But my son, who isn't in school yet, we're on campus all the time, which, I mean, it's a tremendous asset to the city that I hope everyone that's watching this conversation take advantage of. Hey, we're going to get back to this conversation, but if you're like me, you're always trying to advance your skill set and grow both personally and professionally. One of the most effective ways to do this is through advanced degrees. I'm proud to be working with my friends at Kennesaw State University for this podcast. With 3 MBA programs to choose from, executive, evening, or web, their curriculum incorporates the latest industry trends and skills that will allow you to make an immediate impact in your career. With KSU's MBA programs, you'll benefit from a flexible format that fits your schedule, including part-time options, 100% online courses, and even a unique weekend format for their Executive MBA. Graduate in as little as 19 months while building lasting connections with a cohort of peers and professionals. Plus, you can see ROI fast with tuition starting as low as $20,000. Nationally ranked and featuring dual accreditation by AACSB International, ranking it in the top 2% of business schools worldwide, Kennesaw State University will help you reach your full potential. Ready to start your journey? Learn more today at ksumba.com. We've mentioned the CEOs in town a couple of times, and you probably more than most people in a career have interacted with more CEOs than is traditional. What are some misconceptions about folks that are holding the title CEO that you found over the years?
Yeah, look, they're just people, right? And they are nice. They are smart. They care about their employees. They care about Atlanta. They care about, more than you might know. And maybe we're just really lucky here in Atlanta, but I can't think of a single CEO that I've interacted with who has any sense of superiority about themselves. It's just not who we are. And the other thing that always gets said about Atlanta, and I certainly saw this during my time at the Metro Chamber, is that our CEOs like and respect each other, and even the competitors like and respect. If we were trying to, when we tried to get, Mercedes-Benz to move here, I mean, they were stunned at our dinner where all the CEOs were there together. They couldn't believe it. Yeah. And we're like, well, this is what we do. It's Atlanta, and I just am always impressed with just what good people they are. I mean, and I'm not blowing smoke. I mean, that's just the way I feel about the ones that I've had the pleasure to get to know.
From a relationship standpoint, though, you're talking about folks that are incredibly busy, got a lot of responsibilities, both certainly professionally, but I think a lot of times folks don't realize personally as well.
They've got lives.
Their lives there as too. How have you been intentional about building relationships with folks that have a high pressure job and all we just talked about, but still make time to engage with you? Like what strategies do you use to make sure that you're making the most of the time that you have?
Well, I will say this, one of the things that I'm very intentional about is emailing them something that's very crisp and very much to the point, and acknowledging every time, either in the first sentence or the last sentence, I realize how busy you are. And occasionally I need to ask Carol Tomei for advice, Ed Bastian, they are two who come to mind. They talk about responsive. I mean, these people are very, very busy. And once in the day that I had emailed Carol in the morning, I found out what I needed to know by that afternoon. So I sent her an email that just said, ignore my previous email, because that's how busy. She had no business trying to read it. That's how busy she is. And the other thing about these two people that I've mentioned specifically, Carol and Ed, not only do they have family and lives, they do a ton in the community as well. So it's a lot. And the thing that I admire the most about the CEOs in Atlanta is really, and any CEO has to have this, is just the stamina, because very, very few CEOs in Atlanta they're almost all to a person involved seriously in the community and show up. I mean, at the Four Pillar event for the Russells last night, they were there, And, talk about long relationships. I'll just have to throw this one in, because I was corresponding via email today with Michael and Jerome Russell, saying about last night, I had Lovette calling on the two, and I just said, I met your father when I was in my late 30s. And so Michael, emailed back and said, yeah, you've told me that, but tell me what it was about. And so it was just so special that, again, talk about long relationships and, trying to build trust and everything. I mean, Herman Russell invites you down to his office, you just go, and we had two topics, and it was great. And I told them I felt like I kind of made it when he called me down there. It was kind of cool.
Absolute giant in the city. I'm calling this the phone call test, right? It's this idea that when your phone rings, you look at the name that shows up, and there's a feeling that you have. You're either excited to pick up the phone, or sometimes you roll your eyes and you like absolutely are just furious that this person is calling. What do you hope that folks how do you hope that folks react when your name shows up on their phone?
Well, of course, I hope that they are not annoyed or frightened that they're going to get a big ask, because that's no fun for anybody. So, I hope, and look, I'm sort of like the young people. I'm not so much about the phone these days. Just send me a text, just send me an email or whatever. So I'm hoping they would realize that if I'm calling them, it's important.
Sure.
And I also try to learn from my own children. I never call anyone, rarely, without sending a text first. Do you have time for a call now? Or whatever. So because that's something I think is just right, because everybody's so busy, and you can get so much done, with a quick text and all that, that's a great question, but boy, I hope nobody's rolling their eyes. That would be tough.
I don't think they're rolling their eyes, but it's something that I started to think about, just in terms of trying to be intentional when I'm calling someone. There's nothing worse than when you pick up a phone and someone's like, hey, and you're like, hi. And they're like, and there's time and place for everything.
Yeah.
Later in the evening when things are done and you want to catch up,
Yeah.
Sure. But in the middle of the day, the folks that give you the 1 p.m., how you doing?
Yeah. That's just not life.
It isn't. And I'll tell folks, like, I'm so want to talk to you, but
Yes.
it's 1 o'clock and it's Thursday,
Yeah.
and I'm 5 minutes away from going into something else. So
I think that's perfectly legitimate. I mean, listen, we all want to be nice. We do want to be responsive, and we enjoy, you're a social person, as well. I mean, we want to be nice and enjoy people, but I mean, and people, occasionally, I mean, you rarely, but occasionally run into someone that just doesn't have that EQ. They just don't. And I kind of feel for them, because I don't think it comes naturally, or they don't filter naturally, and it's got to be hard.
No, I've had a similar response where it's like, I just wish I could tell this person in love and in respect. It's not meant, but be as specific as you can with the limited time. So it actually brings me to a question. For folks that are going to watch this conversation that are working at an organization right now, and the CEOs that we've been talking about, that's not their direct report, but there are managers, vice presidents, and senior vice presidents that are in the office. What advice do you have for how they can get on the radar of those people? What should they be doing at work every single day?
Yeah, that's just such a great question because, and especially depending on the size of the organization, and you don't ever want to be that person who kind of shows up too much because like they're asking for something. But for me, I really get excited when I see anyone at any level just super engaged in what they're doing, just really caring about it. And doing the above and beyond, and I know these are all cliches, but the thing that I love to see the most is people that have creative solving skills, and they let you see it in there, and that's the way they show up. Not, and it's hard, and there's so much distance, and with people not in the offices every day, and you want people to know that you're interested in, moving up and being more engaged, but you don't want to be that person that let's say that person says, "Oh, they're coming again," but there's a real fine line, and there's a real balance, and again, this comes up all the time, but if you really can find a sponsor, somebody who's already seen how good you are, no matter what level they are, that's a great way to go.
What are the characteristics of people that you're willing to sponsor when you know that you're there?
Yeah, they have to be be responsive. They have to, again, have shown me that it is that true engagement and that creative problem solving, and just, they'd do it if they weren't getting paid. And I don't mean not about having the whole job, but they just can't wait to tackle an issue, can't wait to add something else to whatever's going on. And then people, again, to the point of this conversation about relationships, and I tell people this all the time, I'm like, get out of your chair, get out of your office, go to that lunch, go to that community activity, go do this, go attend XYZ, because it will matter. And there will be people that you will meet today that you may end up having a phenomenal encounter 15 years from now or whatever. So I just say be engaged, live life. I mean, we only have one shot, and the people that don't seem to be living at the fullest speed they can are not my type. You got to live it.
I completely understand. It's like, look, this is a full contact sport, and like, if you're not willing to play the game,
right.
This isn't the right opportunity.
Yeah,
I just
exactly.
Please, let's find the right thing where you can show up that way. But
Right.
I'm totally with you. Switching gears, talking about Atlanta for a second. The city's really important. I'm biased, but I think it's one of the more important cities around. What are you excited about looking forward as you look towards the future of where the city's going?
Well, let me first address that I think Atlanta is an important city as well. And again, I'm biased. I love it. I could be called one of the biggest boosters ever. But I will tell you this, when we are going right now at the Woodruff Arts Center outside of Atlanta to raise money, people like to look at us, Atlanta, and the Woodruff Arts Center in particular in this case, us as an anchor institution, and Atlanta as a place where if you can figure it out in Atlanta, we'd love to see it and hear it, and can it be things that can be scalable? And when we say figure it out in Atlanta, it's about black and white. It's about income inequality, lack of income mobility. It's the things that we face, and it's some of the things that we've done well. We've done black and white really well in some regards, but we got a lot of people left behind, and we're nowhere where we need to be. So they see, when people are, again, outside are looking at us, it's like, wow, if you guys can pull some of these things off, we're talking about neuro arts, we're talking about education, and we're talking about bringing in children and adults and creative aging and all those things together. If you can pull this off in Atlanta and you can show us that this has worked over a lot of different demographics and age groups and social and emotional, social and economic groups, then you've proved something. And let's take a look at you. Let's help you do that, because it needs to be scaled other places. So I think that's, to me, it's Atlanta needs to execute. We need to show we can do something. We need to move these numbers. I mean, I'm really tired of talking about income inequality and tired of talking about the lack of mobility. And we're finally working on a few things that should help, but I think we are an important city, and I get that feedback from legitimate, large foundations across the country.
I was going to ask you this, but you mentioned fundraising, which I think is a part of the equation, right?
Yeah,
when we're
sure.
trying to get there with all of these different efforts. You've raised a lot of money in a lot of different contexts. I imagine relationships are foundational to making that happen.
That's right.
So
Yes.
what do you wish people knew? Because folks see the headlines, they'll see what's already in the capital campaign and what you're about to go raise. What aren't they seeing that goes into the success that you had in raising money?
Well, are we talking about the Woodruff Arts Center specifically?
I mean, that we can focus on that effort.
I kind of like to, because
Sure.
because I think in that case, it goes back to that even some native Atlantans, or even some people who are well versed in Atlanta, they know we have these, again, exquisite art forms there. They're at the top of their game, but they don't know about the educational piece for the children, about what the work that we've done that increases literacy. And let's just be real. I mean, we all know if children can't read, they're never going to be full citizens. And then we also have so much work around this 0 to 5 age, just like your kids spending time there. There are children who aren't spending time there unless the school bus brings them maybe once or twice a year. We need more of that. And so what I want people to know is that we're selling art, but we're selling the outcomes from art, and we're selling the outcomes that we think that this market, and frankly the human race, is desperate for. I mean, that's what I would want them to know. And sure, it helps a whole lot to have a relationship and go and be able to talk to somebody I know, but it also, because I believe so strongly in what I'm selling, even a new person, people get into this. I mean, when you say art and brain development, people get excited, because we're looking for other ways to improve our lives.
I think what's amazing about the work that you do too, and when I talk to other folks about the efforts that you're a part of, they will always describe you as their friend, right?
Oh, nice. Yeah.
It's never, yes, we've worked together, or like sure, we've seen each other in that effort. It's always like, that's my friend over there.
Yeah.
So from a friendship perspective, like it feels like when you're in these events, it feels like you feel the same way, that these are people that you really do care about. Basic foundational question here again, but what are you doing to move what could be a sterile, very just like black and white, I'm here to talk about the issue, into friendship? Like, how do you do that well?
Again, I don't think it's necessarily intentional, but it's who I am. I mean, I will say this: if I ever, in a few times I've been in this situation where it just felt like and almost had to be transactional, and occasionally I run into someone, occasionally, it doesn't happen often, that I can't get to smile back or react back, because and I'm very casual and colloquial. And again, that's just who I am. It would take way too much energy to pretend something else or whatever. So that, I think, is a little bit disarming sometimes for people who aren't that way. I think and then for people who are just like, wow, breath of fresh air. Let's just chat.
Let's talk.
Let's just chat. And I'll tell you, Raphael Bostic, the first time met him. He and I we just hit it off. We had such a blast, and I met his mother the same day. And of course, you can imagine his mother's very proud, and she was adorable. And so and then he and I, with another close friend who I know and he knows as well, we just talked about how familiar I seemed with Raphael right from the beginning. And that term could be used some in a negative way, I guess, too. But it was really kind of the way about it. It's just like, these are just human beings. And if someone's interesting to me, and frankly, almost everybody's interesting to me, and again, those people who are playing the full contact sport, that's who's most interesting to me. So yeah, it just comes naturally. And and again, I think that's why I just don't ever want to stop working, because I want to keep meeting people and learning and knowing what's going on and just kind of being out there.
So my last question, I'm asking everyone this question. So you talk about all of the work that you've been involved in your current role at the Woodruff Arts Center regularly. You're probably one of the more consistent speakers in the city over the last many years. I'm convinced, though, that there are people that we wish that we could talk more about that are also in the conversation that just don't always make it into the talking points of those discussions. So my last question is about one of those people. Who's someone that you think about that you wish you had more time to just have a plain discussion about their influence on your life and the relationship that you had?
Wow. That's a great question. I am just drawing a blank, which is not good, sitting in this chair. No. I mean, there are just so many people that I admire and who have influenced me. I'm gonna say Virginia Hefner, but the only reason that's a little bit disingenuous is because Virginia and I just do have a straight-on talk all the time. You know what I mean? We really, but I admire her so much, and I always admire people who do things that I either can't or haven't done. And for her to retire and devote her whole everything to nonprofit work, the West Side, et cetera, I'm like, dang it, I really admire that. When am I going to wake up one day and say, yeah, I'm just going to go do that. So, and yeah.
I appreciate that. It's again, it's oftentimes hard to find the moment, right? There's all these other conversations that folks don't see, but when you're talking to me, you're talking to my wife, right? And you're talking to various members of the gathering spot that have poured into me. You're talking to my team, right? That's been along the journey. And I regret so many times when I'll finish a discussion all about TGS, but there's always a moment where I'm like, if you only really knew that there's an army. I've said for a long time, this is not a me thing, it's a we thing. And the we is a really, really important part of my journey, and I think everybody's journey. There's a tribe there. Yeah.
I mean, this is one of my standard things, and I've been saying it especially since I became the president of churches, again in '97. I hire people that are smarter than I am. I hire people with different skill sets. Again, I don't hire anybody who's not engaged in the, I love your, full combat mode thing. But you just got to have a great team. You just have to. And it's everything. It's everything. And again, they make it so easy.
Absolutely. I sincerely appreciate the time. You are, from the moment that I met you, a person that has been more than inspirational. I as a person that spends a lot of time meeting people, you're a person that I've studied for a long time, just because you do it not only well, but with just like warmth and authenticity, and that's super hard to do. Folks don't have an appreciation for when you're meeting people day in and day out. It
takes energy.
It takes energy, and it's difficult, especially over years, right? Yeah. I started to notice I was meeting people again in places because I had an association with them in one particular place, right? And as long as I saw them in that place,
I
I knew exactly who they were.
Yes.
But as soon as I saw them somewhere else,
Totally.
they were like a whole new person to me. And I've had moments where I'm like, oh, I really like Ryan, how did you not pick up on the fact? So when I see folks that like do it and like nurture it, and where folks are responsive, right? To my question about the cell phone test, you're one of those folks where when your name pops up, folks know that that's a call that like needs to be taken, and that there's something meaningful on the other side of the line. It's something that I've learned from, and I'm sure folks that are going to watch this conversation will too.
Well, you're very, very kind, and I just, you know how much I appreciate you.
Thank
So,
you. Thank you. This was a great one. I appreciate
good,
you.
good. Thank
See
you.
you soon.